From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
On behalf of the African Middle Eastern Division and our chief, who is out of the country, and all my colleagues, I wish you all the warmest of welcomes to today's program. The African Middle Eastern Division here at the Library of Congress is responsible for developing the collection and providing reference about some 78 countries. And when I say developing the collection, it's that we recommend for acquisition in all formats material from all of Africa, the Arab world, Turkey, Turkic Central Asia, Iran, Afghanistan, the Muslims in China, Russia, and the Balkans. Our responsibilities cover some 78 countries. I'm Chris Murphy. I'm the head of the Near East section here, and I'm acting chief in Dr. Mary Jane Deeb's absence. And Mary Jane, along with the Office of Poetry and Literature here and the Africa Society, have developed this program of conversations with African writers. And I can tell you, Mary Jane is personally, and I completely realize why, she is so proud of these programs. I mentioned the development of the collections. While the staff does that and also provides reference, that is access to the materials that we've acquired, one other task that we have here is that of outreach. And by outreach, we mean making available to the public, both scholarly and general, the materials that we have collected here, and also a certain amount of knowledge about the cultures of the areas for which we are responsible. And this particular set of presentations is designed to really make the culture of literature in Africa known to the broad public, and not just the American public, but a worldwide public, because this program will be videotaped and will later be mounted on the Library of Congress website, a website that receives some 4 billion hits per year from all over the world. So the presenters are speaking really to a worldwide audience, far beyond the people here. Mary Jane has been particularly thankful to Robert Casper of the Poetry Office and to Bernadette Paulo of the Africa Society for their immense assistance in making this event today and the other conversations with artists and poets and writers possible. And with that, I will now turn it over to Matthew Blakely, who is representing Rob Casper today. So, Matthew.
Thank you very much, Chris. And thanks to both the Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa and the African and Middle Eastern Division of the Library. Again, my name is Matt Blakely, and I am the Program Support Assistant of the Poetry and Literature Center at the Library of Congress, and I'm also a proud partner in this series, representing and celebrating literature from across the African continent. Let me ask you now to turn off your cell phones and any electronic devices that you might have, as it will interfere with our event. Second, please note that this program is being recorded, and by participating, you give us permission for further use of the recording. And finally, let me tell you a little bit about our center. We are the home to the Poet Laureate Consultant in Poetry, and we put on about 30 to 40 public programs like this one per year. To find out more about this series and our other programs at the library, please visit our website at www.loc.gov/poetry. You can also find out more about the library's African and Middle Eastern Division and view webcasts and our Conversations with African Poets and Writers series at www.loc.gov/rr/Ahmed. And now I would like to introduce Bernadette Paulo, President and CEO of the Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank our partners and Chris and Matthew for filling in for the heads of their divisions, Mary Jane Deeb and Robert Casper. We've been doing this is our third season, and the Africa Society of the National Summit on Africa, our mission is to educate Americans about the peoples, cultures, contributions of 54 African nations to the United States. What better way can we do that than really to showcase the talent from the continent of Africa? And before I introduce our speaker for today, I have to pause for a moment to tell you about someone who began this series. The first speaker for this series was Professor Ali Mazrui, who will be buried tomorrow in his native Kenya. Professor Mazrui, as many of you know, was a living legend and a renowned scholar. He was actually also one of our board members for 14 years. He wrote over 40 books. He's lectured at over 54 universities around the world. And he did a famous film called The Africans for PBS, which was to Africa what roots meant in the United States to African Americans. So today we acknowledge him. We pay our deepest sympathies to his family, and we pay tribute to him for his contribution to his country, to the continent, and to the world at large. He was noted as by Foreign Policy magazine as one of the top 100 intellectuals in the world. I'm sure, as I stand here, knowing him as I do, that he would be very proud of our guest today. And I'm proud to introduce her. Véronique Tadjo was born in Paris and grew up in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. She did most of her studies in Abidjan and then went on to earn a doctorate degree in African American literature and civilization from the Sorbonne, Paris, in 1983. And there she was awarded a Fulbright scholarship to Howard University to continue her research. She returned to lecture at Abidjan University for several years. She has traveled extensively in Africa and Europe and America and has lived with her family in Lagos, Nairobi, and London. When I'm through reading your bio, you'll be shocked, as was I, upon seeing her, because she looks much younger than I envisioned after having all of these experiences. She's currently based in Johannesburg, where she is chair of the French department at the University of Witwatersrand. She is a visiting professor at Rutgers University this fall. I will not begin to talk to you about her work in French, because as you heard, she teaches French. And I would be very self-conscious of my pronunciation. So instead, I'll talk to you about her works that are translated in English. Some of her novels available in English for all of us are As the Crow Flies, The Shadow of Imana, Travels in the Heart of Rwanda, The Blind Kingdom, and Queen Poku. A bilingual edition of her first collection of poems, Red Earth, is published by Eastern Washington University Press. Far From My Father is the translation of her most recent novel, and it came out in April of this year. Her work has also been translated into several other languages, including German, Swedish, Spanish, and Italian, and features in many anthologies and literary reviews. She has been associated with the Caine Prize for African Writing since 2000. She's been a judge and facilitated its writing workshops. In addition, she has been a member of the jury for the European Union Literary Prize for South African Writing. As though that were not enough, she's produced books for young people. Some of her titles are Mamy Wata and the Monster, I would like to read that book, Lord of the Dance, The Lucky Grain of Corn, The Little Girl Who Did Not Want to Grow Up. I understand her very well. She has edited an anthology of poems from Africa for young people, Talking Drums, published by ANC Black, and Bloomsbury in the United States, Chasing the Sun, a selection of African stories. She has facilitated workshops in several countries, among which are Mali, the Benin Republic, Chad, Haiti, Mauritius, French Guyana, Rwanda, Angola, and Cote d'Ivoire. Apart from illustrating her own children's books, she is a painter. So you can see that she has many talents. And before I have the pleasure of bringing her before you, I just want to introduce you to two people in this audience who are very special to us. That's our Director of Programs, Patricia Bain, who's from Uganda, and Sarah Caruso, who's with us from Kenya. Without our team, as the people at the Library of Congress know, such as Eve Ferguson and others, we wouldn't be able to do this work. Thank you, finally, for joining us. It's a pleasure to see you every time we come, and we look forward to hosting you for this series for many years to come. And now, Véronique.
Hello, good afternoon, and I am really honored to be here, and especially because it's Washington DC, where I have very good memories when I was doing my research here. But it's a real honor to be in the Library of Congress and to see some of my friends from my time in DC at Howard. I will read a little excerpt from Far Away From, It's Far From My Father. We got rid of the away, so it's far from my father. And it's a book about loss and exile, as the Nina, the main character, comes back to Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, after the death of her father. So the time frame is that the time of the funerals, the time it took for the funerals. So I start with the beginning, then I'll just jump a little bit and then continue. Impossible to sleep. Nina had thought that sunset would bring her a bit of peace, yet after sending streaks of purple and gold across the sky, the orb had begun to melt away, sinking below the horizon. Now it was over. Nothing remained but darkness, dense and troubling. She turned away from the dark hole, pulled down the window shade, reclined her seat, and tried to sleep. The plane's wings cut through the night. Anguish rose brutally in her. In just a few hours, she would be there at the house. But without him, without his presence, what was left? Walls, objects, what else? She would need to reconsider everything she had taken for granted. What makes a country home? She had asked Frédéric the evening before she left. I don't know, he admitted, looking a little bit confused. Memories, I guess? Yes, memories. The feel of the sky, the taste of the water, the color of the earth. Faces, moments of love and loss. A home was all of that, a rainbow of sensations stored up as the days passed by. But can one rely on memories? The country was no longer the same. War had left it scarred, disfigured, wounded. To live there now would mean forsaking those outdated memories, ideas from another time. She had been gone far too long. How could they not hold it against her? She had thought that she could travel freely, roaming wherever she chose until it was time to return. Come home, then everything would be just as it had always been, each thing in its place. And she'd have to do so, all she'd have to do was drop her bags and pick up her life right where she had left it. She'd be welcomed with open arms, all the richer for her travels. But that was before the war, before the rebellion. Everything had turned upside down, had crumbled away. The full force of her exile hit her like a whip and sent her reeling. Voices began to shout in her head. Just who do you think you are? You are nothing. Your house was destroyed. Your parents are dead and gone. No one wants you here. Get out. Nina woke up with a start. She must have dozed off. Her heart was pounding. Where was she? Her feet were stolen. Her body ached. I have to get up. Stretch my legs, she thought. She got out of her seat. She was careful not to bump into the sleeping passengers. Some were curled into balls, their mouth open or their nose buried in their neighbor's shoulder. Others with arms sticking out from under blankets, like the stiffened limbs of badly wrapped corpses. She wobbled as she walked, her eyes fixed on the light at the end of the passageway. A flight attendant was organizing trays of food. She tried a few stretching exercises in the back of the cabin, but was unable to overcome the stiffness that had invaded her. She felt like the flight would never end. It wasn't only her body that was abandoning her, but her spirit as well, a black sea as thick as the night. She felt herself beginning to sink. Have I really lost my home? And what if this was really her fault? If she had deliberately set herself apart from the others? Now she was going to find herself face to face with everyone she had left behind years before. How would they see her? Then I just jump a bit. She's facing the immigration officer. The sun had just reappeared when the plane landed. The heavy door opened and, despite the early morning hour, the passengers were suddenly engulfed in a wave of heat that rushed into the cabin, the country's burning breath. While she waited in the immigration line, Nina wondered who would be there to greet her. In the plane, she had been careful to avoid catching the eyes of the other passengers, for fear of being recognized by someone, which was not unlikely on a flight to Cote d'Ivoire. How are you? So what are you up these days? Where do you live? And your dad? Is he well? Anything not to have to pronounce the words that told of his death. Not now, not yet. From behind the window, the officer questioned her in a detached voice. How many days will you stay? Nina hesitated. I'm from here. Does it matter how long? I ask you a question. I'm not sure. About a month? Suddenly, the man's face lit up. Are you the daughter of Dr. Kwayoyao? He asked, holding the passport open in front of him. Yes, Nina replied apprehensively. She wasn't quite sure where he was heading with all his questions. Oh, I know your father well. you're from the same place, we are from the same place. You'll have to say hello to him for me. I'm Corporal Nguessan. He stamped her passport and handed it back with a wide smile, one meant to suggest complicity. Then added quickly, welcome home. Thank you.
Thank you, Véronique. My name is Marita Harper, the area specialist in the African and Middle Eastern Division, and we're going to continue our conversation at the podium where Véronique will respond to questions that I have for her. Good afternoon again. I have the distinct pleasure to continue this conversation with Véronique Tadjo, based on her readings from her most recent novel, Far From My Father. I'd like to know if where your inspiration for this most recent novel that was published originally in French in 2010. And I wondered if it provided, one of my sub-questions to that is, did it provide information on cultural clashes with Western practices?
Okay, thank you very much. The inspiration from this book came from different places, in the sense that I've always traveled a lot, and like in the book, I thought that traveling was not a problem. You travel, you come back, and everybody's happy, and I guess especially if your parents are still there, but you go back to your family house and your friends, but it's a total illusion because things move, things change, and the country also changes. And that's okay, but I think I've always thought that I wasn't in exile because I was always able to come back to, but then when the war happened, which I talk about in the book, in fact it's not the recent one, it's not the post-electoral crisis that we have gone through in 2011 that created a civil war, the equivalent of a civil war. It's the one before, which is called, referred to as the rebellion. But when I learned about that, I was outside. I mean, you could feel it in the air, you knew it was coming, but then I had a feeling of exile. And I think you have a feeling of exile when you know that the place you have left has immediately changed. I mean, it's finished, it's changed. It's not something that you will ever find again. And that also pushed me to write the book.
I know that you have written more than just novels, as your introduction stated, and that you also have written poetry and really received your collection of poems won a literary prize back in 1984. What was the theme of that collection and that brought you to that much attention?
All right. As you may have guessed, I'm very attached to Cote d'Ivoire, and in fact, that first collection of poems came out of my stay in the north of Ivory Coast, in what you would say the Senufo country. Is that it's very, 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 the north is very different from the south of Ivory Coast. The south is like, first there's the biggest city, which is Abidjan, which is the economic capital, but on top of it is the forest, it's green. Whereas when you go up, it's the savannah. So you're talking about a very different country. And I went there to teach in a secondary school, to teach English, as a matter of fact, in the secondary school. And I stayed there for 2 years, and I simply fell in love with the area. I couldn't believe the diversity of Cote d'Ivoire, and I just simply fell in love. And so the collection of poems comes from that period that I stayed, when I stayed up north.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm. And the title is Latérite, which was translated as Red Earth in English. Mm-hmm.
You have been involved with your writing in many forms, and with that, I want to know what your connections have been with African writers, other African writers in the diaspora and in North America.
Mm-hmm. I kind of function in two spheres, the Anglophone sphere and the Francophone sphere, and I think that's probably the best thing I ever did, was to take English at the University of Abidjan, because first that gave me access to Black American literature, and that was a big source of inspiration for my work. And then when I did my research also at Howard University, it was on the Black church and Black theology. And that has also influenced me very much in terms of my vision of religion and the role that it could have in society, especially in a third world country, in a situation of marginalization. So that was very important. And then because I have access to Anglophone writers, I just read. I read them. So I think I have a good knowledge of the Anglophone Africa, the literature from there. So I'm interested in bridging the gap, in communicating, creating some sort of a communication between the two spheres.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you see yourself among the different literary traditions that are from African writers as well as writers in the diaspora? There have been some interest in whether or not African writers are interpreting their oral traditions or their writing in their own language, whether or not some of that has influenced you.
Yes.
And in what way?
Yeah, definitely. I like oral literature very much. Oral poetry. For example, if you take Yoruba poetry, for example, it's fantastic, and all the mythology and all that. I take a lot from it. Same thing on the Francophone side, let's say the Francophone sphere. I have been very drawn to oral tradition, and the book that I wrote, Queen Pokou, is almost entirely based on that kind of oral tradition and history and culture. So it's very important for me, and also I've been inspired by our predecessors. I mean, the Negritude movement is still something that resonates in me. I mean, we're living in different days. We're not talking about independence anymore, the fight for independence. We've had our independence. Whether that was successful, I don't think so. So we still have a lot of work to do. And what I'm interested in the Negritude movement is they were able to be committed, but at the same time to have a lyrical voice. And that's what interests me, is that the junction of these two dimensions. And I think that we can still learn a lot from them. And I see myself in that tradition, going forward, of course, and with new challenges, different challenges. But I think we can still take a lot from them. I learn a lot from them. And also it's part of our tradition. I mean, we're coming with a baggage. We also have a baggage. If you go from oral tradition to all these people who've been working at changing the face of Africa, then that's a rich tradition. And I think we have to acknowledge that.
Thank you. I'm going to just ask one brief question, and then I'm going to give mics to the audience, because they may have some additional questions they would like to ask you. What literary project are you working on now? Because I know that you are teaching at the University of Witwatersrand.
Yeah, Witwatersrand.
Witwatersrand.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one. So we say Wits University.
In South Africa.
For short, yes.
So, and you're just visiting with us in the States at Rutgers University at the moment. And so I just want to find out if there's any project in mind with your visits you may have in mind that you could share with us.
Yes, but first I must say I'm enjoying myself very much in New Jersey and even in New Brunswick, which is a very, very, very tiny place. But it's a university town, and I'm just enjoying the seminar that I'm teaching. I've got a wonderful group of students. And so I'm taking a lot from it. And otherwise, I'm in Joburg, and as you know, Johannesburg is a big city. It's the pulse of South Africa, and it's a very interesting place because it's moving all the time. There's always something happening, and sometimes I say that in Joburg. Everything is multiplied by 10 in terms of African issues. And it's also recent history, because Mandela died recently, in 2013, but you still have big people like Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Winnie Mandela, and it's like you're watching history, and it's also a country in transformation. So you're watching that, and I find it very interesting. Of course, there are a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties. It's sometimes frustrating to be there because of the pace of change, which is not going fast enough, but it's worth it. Yeah. And my project, I've just finished a book based on South Africa, and I'm thinking about another one, another book in mind.
Oh, well, thank you for letting us know about what we can plan to read of your in the future. I'll open it up to our audience.
2 short questions. I wanted you to go back to the Negritude reference and maybe be a little more specific. are you more influenced by, say, Senghor, Senzer, or Damas? And the other question is, you are also a painter, and I was wondering how sometimes your ideas that might be on a canvas or a sketch are translated into maybe a literary form.
Thanks. I'm interested, I must say, on a personal level, the poetry of Léopold Sédar Senghor touches me a lot. But this, I think they did different things in the Negritude movement. Aimé Césaire was much more punchy and had a more radical view of the Negritude. So I'm also drawn to his type of writing. But Léon Gontran Damas, also I like his humor, because he was able to articulate the feelings of the times, but with that little edge, which makes it very, very, very effective. Otherwise, we have Biago Diop, you have a lot of people. I think they were doing their things differently, but when you look at them, that's a whole corpus of work. So yes, I've been influenced greatly. In terms of the painting, I very often call it my secret garden because when I paint, I kind of cleanse my mind. It cleanses my mind, and then I think it helps me to be a better writer. It's a different part of the brain, and I think it's like speaking a different language. Basically, you're using another mode, and you're talking about signs again. You're using signs, you're using color, and yeah, I see it as another idiom. Yeah.
In some of your early work, I know your work is very surrealistic, and I wonder whether it comes with painting.
You see, you're talking about writing in a kind of surrealistic way. Do you know, if you're inspired by oral tradition, you have it. Don't go any further. I mean, there is some modernity in African art and oral literature that is absolutely amazing. Just go to Yoruba, as I said, because this is what is in my mind, but just go to Yoruba poetry. Oh, they jump from one thing to the other, and association of images, and it is amazing. And that's where I find the modernity. And even if you take African art, sculpture, masks, wow. I mean, because they were not looking at the figurative way. So, by the way, may I just recall that Picasso, one of the greatest artists of all times, was deeply, deeply inspired by what was called at the time primitive art and African art. It changed his way of looking at painting completely. And in Johannesburg, about a couple of years ago, we had this beautiful exhibition, and the title was Picasso and Africa. And so we had works of Picasso and the pieces that inspired him. And there were pieces from all over Africa. So that's why I'm saying, you know, it's all in your eyes. There is an amazing modernity in oral tradition. And that's for me is key.
Yes, thank you. I have a question. You mentioned several times the interconnection and the flow from the oral, even say the African, to the formal francophone literature. Do you see from that formal, written art, that formal, even some ways European presentation, a flow back into the oral? Is it a two-way, or is it simply a one-way?
You may want to repeat this question. You may want to repeat this question so they'll hear it.
Oh, yes, yes. Whether oral tradition is a two-way in the sense, you mean that it influences writers, contemporary writers?
That the contemporary formal
Mhm.
literature influences the oral literature.
Ah, okay. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is, for example, you have something like Onitsha market literature, which is very urban in terms of the themes, but obviously coming from oral tradition. In the content and the vision of the world. You also have a classic today is my life in the bush, in the ghost book, of Amos Tutuola, which was also a very important book, also drawn from oral tradition. So I think oral traditions are alive. They have the capacity to adapt and become in some way urban. I will take one myth which that I like very much, which is the myth of Mamy Wata, which is the, if you want to be a bit simplistic, the African mermaid. But I think she's much more than that. But she has been able to adapt. Her figure has adapted, and she's now urban. You see, she's now in cities, in the sense that people have still in their imagination this idea that Mamy Wata is a character that lives in urban centers, like Lagos.
Okay.
You know, they will tell you, be careful if at night you meet this beautiful woman who, she could be a Mamy Wata, so beware. What I mean is that it's moving, it's alive. So it's a two-way. Yeah, you could say that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Many African authors who are here talk about the fact that though they are from African countries, and there is this classification of African literature now,
Mm-hmm.
that they know that they will have made it when African literature and African writers and poets become part of world literature.
Mm-hmm.
And since you've translated your works in so many countries, this categorization that persists, is it like that for you in Paris, for example? How is your work classified? Where would I be able to go in a library in France and find your work?
Yeah, it's a burning question. It's a question that at times has divided us. I'm happy with the African literature title. That means I consider myself as an African writer. This being said, I would like everybody to read my books. I mean, crossing borders. But I just remember what Senghor said at some point. He said it's about rootedness and openness. That means you're rooted in a culture, you come from somewhere, but then you're open to the world. And I think that's how I see it, because if you come without a baggage, you very soon are going to dangle, in the air and lose all your references. So I think if you come with something, then you can bring something and you can receive something, and you can really work with the others. And then I think that's why I said we still have to revisit what they said, leave some, take some, but that one I think is something which stands. Yes.
Paraphrase.
I'm very much interested in your
Question.
new book, which is situated in South Africa. I'm interested in seeing, hearing, reading how you as an Ivoirian see South African society. I'm curious about your background
Mm-hmm.
with African American studies
Mm-hmm.
and what you may have taken from that and
Mhm.
used wondering if you have done work which is situated here in the U.S. or situated in an African American community. If in any of your works you have African American characters. Also, China in Africa is a big financial and economic entity. Seldom, though, I think, do we see Chinese characters in literature. I know in a few films there are characters. So in literature, in African literature, is China visible at all? Lastly, and this is the third question, Ebola, which is, I can't think of an adjective, but in literature, hold it out a little bit, okay. But in literature, I'm wondering if there's anything that's visible already. I know that in music, there are danceable songs. Do you see anything coming? Poetry relating to that phenomenon. So that's the end of my spiel.
Okay, the first question was about African American literature and whether I have been influenced by it. Is that it? Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, reading Song of Solomon, I mean, there's no surprise to anybody. Was really a key text for me in terms of the language, the themes. That was very important. But I think I also read a lot of the what I call classics. So it was very, very, very important. And it's funny you should say that because my second book, As the Crow Flies, is opening with a chapter on Washington, set in Washington, D.C. That's how the book opens. I find myself in Washington, D.C., and it's a book about traveling. And there's another book, The Blind Kingdom, and in The Blind Kingdom there is a character who is a poet, a prophet, some sort of a preacher. And that came directly from my research on the Black Church and Black theology. I was looking at, as I said, the role of religion when you find difficult situations. And so James Cone writing was very important for my vision of religion. So yes, I worked on. Yeah, you can find it in different books. Now the second question was on on China. China. You know, I've never been to China, so no. I think it's important when you know something, you can talk better about it. I know that. This is controversial. Some people say, no, you can write about anything, even if you haven't been there. I mean, I don't know, in my life, I don't meet enough, I would say, Chinese people to be able to feature them in my books, for example. So if it happens, I will certainly do it, because I know that in terms of the importance of China for the future of Africa, this is big. But I want to know a bit more, and at the moment I'm not in that situation. I know some other writers have done it, but I don't feel equipped at the moment. Now concerning Ebola. I was telling you earlier that I have another project in mind, and that's I want to really reflect on what is happening, because it's an earthquake. It's an earthquake, and it concerns the whole of humanity, and we have to address it.
Okay, I think we have time for at least 2 more questions.
Hi, Véronique. A very different kind of question. You've been teaching at Wits. I remember when I first went to the English department at Wits in about 1994. They were barely teaching African literatures. It was all just beginning to enter into the curriculum. What does the curriculum look like today, and what are the students at Wits interested in writing about today?
Okay, that's a. I was going to say that's a tough one, because Wits University is a big university. It's very big, lots of departments, English department, modern languages, and today you have an African literature department. So it's a department just for African literature, and it's doing well. They have a lot of students, and they're doing South African literature from West Africa, and also a bit of Francophone literature, but in translation. And I'd like to push it a bit more, but that's it's not doing badly as a department. It's doing, I would say, well. And there's the English department, where you can also take something like South African literature or anything in translation. Not much, but they also do a bit. Could be more, definitely could be more. I think that the students are very interested in the job market. I think like everywhere else, they worry about how they're going to get a job. So, the business school is doing well. Voila, you have to, and sometimes they do a minor and a major, and so they mix and match, that sort of thing. And the university itself is changing. The population of students is becoming more. There's more black students. As I said, everywhere is in transformation.
In terms of what the students are addressing in their writing?
Oh, you know how it is at university. You get an essay, you have an essay assignment. So it's more the lecturers that you should talk about. What they ask the students to write about. It depends on the books that are on the curriculum.
Creative writing?
Oh, creative writing. Yes, there is a very good department of creative writing. Very good. Yeah, very, very good. Very, very dynamic. And all sorts of themes. Really, they're looking at history a lot. They're looking at urban South Africa. They're looking at new genres as well, like the detective story, science fiction. Yes, they're really prodding contemporary South Africa. For a while, when it was the end of apartheid, they were like, okay, what next? What do you have to say? But now it's coming back. The dynamism, and it's more looking at contemporary society, and also a bit of disenchantment, a bit of disillusion, and so you have those types of books coming out.
And our last question.
There has been increased attention on this side of the Atlantic to African writers, particularly African women writers. And I'd like to hear your comments on that. And also, what contemporary writers are you influenced by, and what is the exchange of ideas like with those writers?
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's some kind of a phenomenon. You have a lot of women writers who are in prominence. And I think you can understand it is because women came a bit later in terms of in the education system. So you needed that generation to come out of the education system, access to more possibilities, and then traveling as well, moving around. And so, yes, I find it very, very interesting, very, very interesting. And I think that is going to go on. Yeah, I think we're on a path, and this is like has become a phenomenon. But it's because women writers came later. So today, because they're coming in great number, you feel like, how come they're in the forefront? But it's just because they've kind of just arrived. Like if you take the Francophone world, you date it from 1980s. The 1980s,
Yes.
when you really
That's right.
can see a new movement. So it's fairly recent. The second part was? Oh, the writers that have influenced me. I think they come from all sorts of places. They come from the continent, on the Anglophone side, on the Francophone side, but I might be influenced by a writer from France, a writer from the States. It's like it's diverse. I cannot say there's only one writer that has influenced me, but I'm very open to what is happening in different parts of the world. Oh, the exchange between us, African writers. I mean, for me, it's a big family. I feel like, I really feel like we usually know each other, we know of each other, we read each other's books. I see myself as it's my second family.
Yes.
Definitely.
All right. Thank you, Veronique Tadjo. And let's give her a round of applause for her conversation with us today. And for that reason, we also have her book, Far From My Father, in the back for you to get a copy, and also to have her to sign for you her copy. And thank you again for coming today.
Thank you very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.